And that is why, when you challenge the atheist side on this very point, they run from it, refusing to discuss it. That is why nobody ever answers Thomas Nagel's question, why is it that they so much want there not to be a God?
I gotta stop doing that. I'm getting old. Ow. Right. I don't want there not to be a God. I think it'd be cool if God existed. I mean, I did that for you. Can you just sort my hair out now? Sure. There you go. See? That'd be great, wouldn't it? It'd be like having a game dev. Changing your avatar or your surroundings, but in real life. You see, the problem isn't that I don't want there not to be a God. It's just that in our universe, there doesn't seem to be a reason to believe in God. I kind of like this debate, though, because although the usual misrepresentation is still at play, there is some honesty in this that somehow just gets overlooked. Just completely missed. And yet, for some reason, seems to be one of the most important parts. Now, before we get into this, I would like to point out that I found this video on some, rando's channel. Just a small YouTuber who's using this entire clip for the majority of the video, but still felt I need to add something on at the end. So let's hear Peter Hitchens' speech about God and why he stopped being an atheist.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hate this argument. In fact, I loathe taking part in it almost more than any other argument I ever take part in. For why? Because I have to come up here and defend the religion of love, brotherhood, peace, justice, and turning the other cheek rather than kicking the other guy in the crotch.
I'm sorry to hear that it disheartens Peter to not be violent. Maybe he does need religion to, be a good person. But then again, he thinks that Christianity is all about love, peace, brotherhood, and justice. Which is far from completely true. Don't get me wrong though, there are parts of Christianity where that may be the case. However, the parts that stand out to me the most are where God seems to be a genocidal maniac, and that time where God itself directly kills a baby because of its father's sins. Which also seems contrary to Christian belief. Not all Christians believe that the Bible is a literal historical text, which I don't think Peter does either. Being a Christian is a claim that somebody makes upon themselves, and everyone is an individual. But arguments like what Peter Hitchens just said here are for people who haven't read the Bible to know what's inside of it.
And I have to listen while I'm doing it to these gentlemen, who remind me constantly of the most irritating, infuriating, revolting person I ever knew, namely my adolescent self. Honestly, I mean, haven't we all heard it all before? Horus, Mithras, they're all the same. No, they're not all the same, they all disagree with each other. They must be wrong, they can't all be right. This is the stuff of sixth form debate.
If your understanding of that argument is of a 6th grade level, then sure, it is. In my opinion, it's not an argument to be made. It's an aid to help a theist understand the atheist position. There have been many gods presented to us throughout all of history, and neither of us believe in most of them. Many of those gods still persist to this day, and I don't believe in any of them, but a theist usually believes in at least one of them, and doesn't believe in many others. So a theist and an atheist are very similar. It's just that a theist believes in one God, at least. It's just to point out that I view their religion in the same regard they view other religions, like Hinduism, or for a Hindu, Christianity. It just allows a theist to think about what convinces them of their specific God in comparison to any of the other gods, so that they can actually specify their claims and make it clear when they're talking to an atheist. For example, the most common one I see from Islam is the first cause. Who tipped the first domino? What is the bottom turtle? Those sorts of claims work for any god. Even a polytheistic god, you could still have one god that created multiple gods that are slightly different, I don't know, and then, from there, sprouted from one god. It doesn't mean that Allah is the one true god, it just means that you think there's a god for that reason. So for an atheist to make this case, they're trying to ask you, why is it your god and not any other god? That's kind of how I'd explain what this is used for, rather than just a piss take, I guess. And it also may help understand why I don't believe in their God for the same reasons a theist doesn't, but I don't believe in the specific theist's God for the exact same reason. I grew up knowing of the word God, but I didn't really have any specific religious context for that word. I just knew that there was many different versions of God. And with that in mind, I grew up treating it like any other supernatural entity. You know, like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. And I know some people use that as an offensive term, but I'm genuinely just trying to get across how I viewed God. I'd just been waiting for people to tell me that God wasn't real and that they just pretend, just like with the Easter Bunny and Santa. It was one of those things. I was waiting for it to happen, and then I realised, holy shit, people believe in this. Like, for real. And that was a big shock to me, to find out that people believe this. And also, just to be clear, I put it in the same category as ghosts, spectres, wraiths, vampires and werewolves, you know? You trying to tell me that God is real and exists in reality sounds, to me, just like as if I was to tell you that the Easter Bunny was real and hibernates all year round only to wake up to deliver chocolate eggs and hide them somewhere. Both claims are unfalsifiable, and there's no reason to take any of them seriously. And as a final point, just like with Christians not all being the same, atheists aren't all the same either.
There has been nothing serious said against the concept of God by the opposition this evening at all. I am expecting something serious to come from the third speaker, but there hasn't been anything so far. I'm really hoping, because it would be nice.
Yeah, I'm hoping the same thing, but I'm guessing both of us are going to be disappointed by the end of this video.
Because this is not fundamentally a serious discussion as it has been held so far from the other side. And it's not serious for a very simple reason. It's not arguing about what we ought to be arguing about. I'm going to have a little bit of poetry here for those of you who appreciate that sort of thing.
This debate isn't debating the thing we should be debating. But first, poetry. Well, it's not my thing, but I'll listen anyway, I suppose.
It's from the 38th chapter of the book of Job. God speaks from the whirlwind, and he asks, "Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof?" The answer, ladies and gentlemen, from the opposition is they haven't a clue.
So basically, we need to be debating things that nobody knows the truth to. If you don't understand what he was meaning there, a problem, one with the Bible, a book that God had inspired that so many people have tried to understand and have pretty much failed to do so. My evidence for that, there's over 2,000 different versions of Christianity. There are so many people that just don't understand it, even those that genuinely try to read it. But the argument made was, God, I'm going to need your help for this one. We need your godly voice.
And he asks, "Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge?"
Pretty much that we are talking about things without the knowledge needed to understand.
"Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me.
You, mere mortal, will answer my question.
Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding."
Where the fuck were you when I built the earth? Tell me if you understand what I did.
"Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it?
Did I use the metric system or American?
Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof?"
The author of this did not know how the earth was made, so treated it like architecture. Don't worry, God, I got this last one. And with a poem very clearly referencing the earth, the creation of which we very clearly understand, I'm just going to agree that the poem was referring to the universe, existence itself.
The answer, ladies and gentlemen, from the opposition is they haven't a clue.
The answer is nobody knows the origin. Nobody could possibly know it at all. But I'm going to pretend that this problem is only that of the opposition's, and for some reason, I don't have to answer it. But to stuff like this, the only intellectually honest answer that you can give is I don't know. And that answer is okay, if that is true. For a theist to go on and make extra claims that are unsubstantiated and have no evidence for it, it's problematic because you expect it from your opposition, but don't really see reason to do so yourself. I find that really strange. And honestly, it's a big red flag. So many times on this channel we see that happen. But that's why I wanted to cover this video, because Peter Hitchens doesn't necessarily do that. He actually agrees that we don't know.
Nor have I. Nor has anybody in this room. We haven't the faintest idea. Nothing that any of us could say here tonight could convince anybody that they knew that God existed.
If that is true, and everyone in that room thinks that way, then everyone in that room is an agnostic, because that's about knowledge. Agnosticism is unknowing, or lack of knowledge. So if we don't have the knowledge, we can still have a belief. Like, I believe in a God, or I don't believe in a God. So that room is filled with unknowing believers and unknowing disbelievers. And I suppose there might be some people in there who haven't got a stance on their belief, who are simply just agnostic, unknowing, and undecided.
What we are discussing here is a matter of opinion. And a matter of opinion, Mr. President, is a matter of choice. And the real question before us is why we choose what we choose. And this is the most fascinating part of the argument.
So the real question Peter Hitchens is trying to get across here isn't about whether what we believe is true or not. It's actually about why we choose what we choose to believe in. To be fair, I do actually find this a very interesting question. Why do theists believe in a God? Ultimately, the only thing they can truly say is they don't know whether a God exists, but they choose to believe one does. I'm fine with that. Genuinely am. I don't agree with it, but I'm fine with it. What I find very interesting is this God that you seem to know nothing about but presume exists, and yet you seem to know so much about him. For example, that he's a him.
That I and my fellow atheists so much want there not to be a God. Why is it, ladies and gentlemen, they so much want there not to be a God? Why would you want there not to be a God?
I don't know if there's a God, as we've said multiple times on this channel and in this video. And if we do somehow one day figure this out and that there is a God, I imagine this would have no effect on my life whatsoever. Because if we find out that a God exists, then he will have always existed. And if he does exist, he exists now, and could affect my life still anyway. I don't think God cares whether I know that he exists. The only difference would be that I now know that he exists. That's it. So to be clear, I don't want there not to be a God. Personally, I don't care. Stop claiming that you know what all people believe in, when not all atheists even believe in the same thing anyway.
Why would you want to live in a purposeless chaos in which none of your actions had any significance, in which there was no hope of justice, in which the lives of all those whom you loved ended abruptly at death and had no further significance? Why would you want, desire, actively wish to live in a universe as disgusting as that?
As disgusting as the universe may be, there's no reason to believe in anything else. It's just opinions. And remember, opinions don't change reality. The only difference here is that Peter thinks that this is God's creation, and when described as God's creation, suddenly, and remember, nothing's actually changed apart from the origins of the universe, whether it's God's creation or not. All of a sudden, I imagine that Peter would describe the universe as majestic and a wondrous place to live within. Perfectly tuned, if you like. Which would be a massive change in opinion based on, history compared to present day, and you're describing present day based on something that happened a long time ago. What we want is irrelevant in this specific case. Instead, it's more about where we find ourselves, and if that's what you take from the universe that we live in, then fair enough, you can believe that. But let's go over those claims you made that if there's no God, we live in a purposeless chaos. Well, the universe is chaotic. On the largest and smallest of scales, it is chaotic. And that chaos is beautiful. I know chaos is usually a negative word, but that's just our human interpretation of words. Actions are insignificant. So what? Maybe they are. Maybe actions are insignificant. But maybe humans find significance in their actions. If a God exists, this doesn't change either. All of our actions can amount to nothing if God tries to kill us all again. And for most religions, the majority of people that exist will end up in hell anyway, because they're disbelievers of that religion. Even with Christianity, I know it's like a very popular religion, different derivations of Christianity will have other Christians go to hell for not believing in their version of Christianity. So maybe actions still are insignificant in this scenario, because we can't know which version of Christianity at the very least is correct. No hope of justice. I have hope of justice. I mean, we have the Justice League after all. Joking. They live in America. No, we have our own justice system. If I go outside and some randomer kills me, then I have hope that the police will find and capture that murderer and bring them to justice. But there's no reason to assume that that person who killed me may turn around and get killed by someone else and then end up going to hell and being punished there for it. I'd rather find out that they got punished in real life, though I'd be dead, so I guess I wouldn't personally care. But you get my point. But even if the Christian God was real, the problem still persists. I mean, I go outside, some randomer kills me, and then in a year's time, let's say, he goes to a church, repents his sins, and he gets a free pass from Jesus. I mean, Jesus paid for his sins. So, again, this is a problem for both sides, maybe. Actually, there seems to be more of a problem for just certain Christians on this one, depending on their belief. Death being final. Yeah, I think death is final. But I also think that things that are true can have much greater meaning than simple existence. It might be nicer to think of an eternal existence for those that have passed because we miss them and we hope that they still exist in some way, because it's easier to cope with the grieving. And it's going to be very difficult to cope with that sort of loss, knowing that death is permanent. And it would be harder to go through the grieving process when death is permanent in their belief. Now, I don't have any substantial reason to believe that an afterlife actually exists, but you don't need to believe in God to believe in an afterlife. Beyond the idea that many people don't believe in a God but also still believe in an afterlife, there is also the idea that time itself is relative. It's sort of an illusion. We know that other animals experience time in a different way than we do at the very least, so it's possible that time could be manipulated in our minds. For example, time seems to fly by when you're having fun, but yet when you're doing something really boring, it seems to go really slow. This is just perception, but from your perspective, and if your perspective's the only one in the afterlife in this case, maybe that's all you need for an afterlife. If when you pass, your brain realizes that you're about to experience death, and it has the time to maybe create some form of afterlife in your mind, it could also make time be perceived differently too. And that very short moment, that instant before you die, it could create a potentially infinite or imperceivable time length for you to perceive an afterlife eternally in that one instance of time. A bit of crazy physics in that one. I could go on and on trying to explain it, but it's kind of irrelevant, so I just thought I'd create a really very simplified version of it. But it kind of works more like frame rates than it does actually slowing down and speeding up time. You just got more things to work with in the same amount of time, and that creates a different perception of time. Now, I don't believe that this is actually the case. It was just an example of a naturalistic explanation of an afterlife that I could come up with off the top of my head. There may be other ways of an afterlife actually existing in reality that we don't even have evidence for yet. Maybe one day we will. I'm open to the idea, but I'd like evidence to back it up. Another different take on this is the way that I look on it, and it's that death is final and it is permanent. So when you die, from your perception, you have passed. But when it comes to other things, and I'm going to use something extreme here, let's say the dinosaurs. 65 million years ago, they went extinct. So, unfortunately, there's none really around anymore. But in one way, they do still exist in the universe. If I were an alien using a super advanced telescope of some description, maybe I gravitationally lens a planet. I put a planet here, telescope, and I lens around the planet, I could potentially see dinosaurs on the Earth. Maybe I'd need a black hole to lens around, to be fair. You'd need something of a large scale. Anyway, I'm going a bit too far into it. The dinosaurs would be visible because of the distance away from Earth that they are. It takes time for light to travel from Earth to reach the alien planet that we're hypothetically creating 65 million light years away. They'd be able to witness the asteroid impact the Earth because of light taking time to travel there and reach the alien's eyes. So in some way, the dinosaurs are dead, but they still exist and propagate throughout the universe in the form of light waves, at least. The universe is just a canvas that we see in the form of light waves, I guess. You know what, I'm calling it. Theists lack creativity.
You'd have to have a very good reason. And I think these gentlemen do have a very good reason, and it's what they never ever wish to discuss. They don't want justice. They do want the dead to be dead. They do want the universe to be purposeless. They do not want their own individual actions to have any other significance than their immediate effect. You will have to discuss with them why they should be so keen on that proposition.
Never wish to discuss? Are you sure? I don't think you've tried hard enough, or you're ignoring people, to be fair. I was extremely excited to talk about these topics when I saw this video. But don't worry, I think we've covered it a lot in this video as it is, so we'll just move on at this point.
But from our side of the argument, what we say is that if we desire justice for ourselves, we also desire it for other people. And likewise, if we desire it for other people, we require it for ourselves and we bring it upon ourselves. And on the basis of that, we construct, with some difficulty, with a certain amount of historical knowledge, in the case of some of us with an enormous amount of scientific knowledge of the universe, we construct a belief which helps us to discover, insofar as it is possible, what it is we ought to do and how it is we ought to live, in the belief that there is justice, that there is hope, that death is not the end, that our actions have a significance beyond what we immediately do.
I don't doubt that there are people there with a wealth of knowledge, both historical and scientific. But historically speaking, I don't think we should be basing what we ought to do and how we ought to live on history. That's why we make progress, and for most, are a lot better off for it. It surprises me that he claimed that there was a wealth of scientific knowledge there, whilst speaking on behalf of them, whilst presupposing things that we have no evidence for, like the idea that death is not final. Isn't that presupposing, the thing that science shouldn't do? Unless you have evidential reason to support your presupposition on that claim. I'm guessing not, but I'm also failing to see where this is actually meant to be going.
That really is what we are discussing. Do you want it, or do you not want it? If you don't want it, then you can simply turn with raillery and badinage and mock the beliefs of others.
Ah, I see. You just show all the things you don't like about a group of people, some of which you made up, then asking if you want to be like them or not. It's an us versus them mentality, with a false dichotomy. Although hidden by a man presenting his argument in a very intellectual manner, it doesn't mean that the argument itself also is. It's like saying, here's mansion A. I believe it's a shithole. Here's mansion B. I think it's luxurious. Okay, thank you for telling me about those two mansions and what you think of them, but can I have a look inside before I decide? Oh, no, you don't want to do that. You might realise there are evil entities living inside my mansion. Oh, okay, but what about all the other mansions? I mean, there's thousands of them. Oh, those are nothing to worry about. They're all false mansions anyway. Of course, Mansion B is the one true mansion. You see what I'm saying here, right? All the mansions are religions. But Mansion A was atheism.
I don't care to do that. I think atheists have a serious point of view. I understand why they seem so anxious to press it upon you. And I know, thanks to the general destruction and retreat of institutional Christianity in our society, that many people growing up feel under a great deal of conformist pressure because it is very fashionable to follow atheism at the moment.
Why is everything they don't like a trend? I mean, atheism has existed for as long as theism has, because before theism we couldn't have had any belief on the matter because we weren't even aware of this concept at all. So I guess we would have all been agnostic before any form of God was presented. It'd be just as silly for me to say theism is a trend these days. That trend that lasted, thousands of years. I think after a few thousand years it stops being a trend. But either way, I don't think it's even relevant. Even if I was the only atheist on the planet, I would still think everyone else was crazy for believing in what they believe in. Same as if Peter was the only theist on the planet, he'd probably think everyone else was crazy for not believing in the God. However, being the only atheist left on the planet, I think I'd be killed for it. Whereas on the flip side, I don't think he would be. For example, it is even illegal in some countries on the planet today, and you can be executed for being an atheist. I don't know anywhere where you can be killed for being a theist because of atheism. But I'll admit, that's Islam, not Christianity, at least as far as I'm aware. But it's not like it doesn't happen at all in Christianity. I mean, Christian pastors are still out there spreading the message that gay people should be executed by the government, which is obviously wrong. Which, quite frankly, is putting it as nicely as I possibly could, and is, quite frankly, diabolical at that level, let alone how far they go with it.
It's interesting that we had, he wasn't properly named, but Laplace quoted earlier on this evening as mocking the idea that he needed any such concept as God because he understood the universe perfectly without it. Quite why it stays up, I don't know, but he thought that he didn't need that explanation.
Saying you don't need any concept of a God is perfectly fine, especially in science where we want to understand things. Putting God in a scientific paper is literally saying that you don't understand it. On the other hand, no one can claim that they understand the universe perfectly at all. For example, we still don't understand the movement of galaxies. That's where dark matter comes into play. We still don't understand the origin of the Big Bang. We don't understand... We can go so far back, but we can't go all the way back, and it might be very difficult to do so if you start looking into it a bit more. Though, to be fair, I don't think I can really trust Peter on this regard based on this person here. I'd probably have to look it up myself. Maybe Laplace was a butthole, I don't know. But he was in a time where God was being written into scientific papers, and he was clearly a scientist that wanted to understand the universe. So, even I get annoyed when I ask, where did the universe come from? And people say, God did it. It doesn't make sense even answering the question. Because that's like saying how a computer's made, and you say Microsoft. It tells me nothing about the question I originally asked. Probably from that annoyance, maybe? I don't know, but that's what I would guess. It wouldn't surprise me that if he had any issues, it would have probably have been more likely to have been caused by his religious peers at the time.
Look up Laplace, some of you, and find out what an extremely nasty piece of work he was. I've no wonder he had no need for the concept of God. People like that don't, because God in our society stands very much against. And this is why I, after many, many years of not believing in God, came round to the view that I would choose to do so and act as if there is a God.
Oh, well, that's a very different stance on the matter here. Peter used to be an atheist, which is fine. You can't choose what you believe in. I didn't choose to be an atheist either. I just am one. So Peter is only choosing to believe in God. He doesn't actually believe in God. As he said, he is acting as if he believes in God. But I find it even more confusing in that regard as to why you chose Christianity. Surely there's a more peaceful one. I mean, sure, you want to be a Christian, you can. You can claim to be a Christian. You have the freedom to do so. I could become an atheistic Christian. I have the freedom to do that too. I could attempt to convert myself. I could believe in everything in the Bible, even in some form of literal stance, and just claim that God wasn't actually a God, because we've never really defined God specifically. We've only defined him religiously. It's really hard to find a definition of God that doesn't come from a religious context. You know, just the concept of a God. From my understanding, the only thing God needs to have done is create existence. Because if we find out in reality that there is a God and he didn't do that one thing, then he isn't a God. Because he didn't create the first thing, or start the very essence of existence, if you like. If he did anything else, like create us, but didn't create the universe, then he wouldn't have been a god. But if he didn't create us and we happen naturally, but did create the universe, then he would be considered a god. So that's pretty much my definition of a god, and if I don't think the biblical God did that, or didn't create his own existence to create that, then he didn't create the first thing. So I could be an atheistic Christian. But no matter how much I try to convert myself, I don't think I'd ever truly believe that God is real, because you don't choose your belief. So if Peter Hitchens is being completely honest here, then he is choosing to believe in a God, but he doesn't actually believe in one, because you don't choose your beliefs. Though that's not to say that beliefs cannot be changed. You can change your belief, but it takes time and effort and a way to figure that out yourself.
God is the principal opposition in our society to lawless, ruthless power. To the bully, to the autocrat, to the despot, to the criminal, to the person who treats his neighbors like dirt. Fundamentally, once we have dispensed with that concept in our society, we are left with nothing. Now, the atheists don't wish to discuss this because they know exactly what I'm saying.
We do know exactly what you're saying, and atheists discuss this all the time. This is no longer the God concept. This is who God actually is, and whether we should worship it or not. I will grant Peter the opportunity for me to temporarily accept that God exists, and his God is the one true God, because he is now making claims about his God rather than for God. And he fucking ironically said, God is opposition to lawless, ruthless power. No, that's what God is. Read the Bible. Bullies. Maybe you're right there. But then again, God did convince Abraham to sacrifice his son, only for Abraham to take his son, and agree to this, up the mountain to put him on an altar, and just before he does it, God's there like, I was just kidding, don't actually do it. It was just a joke. No need to actually kill the child, I didn't think you'd actually do what I said. The autocrat, a ruler with absolute power. Again, I think it's pretty obvious if you read the Bible, that's not what God's opposed to. That's just what he is. The despot, basically the same as autocrat, but more oppressive. Look at the Ten Commandments. The first 3 are about him, God, and how to worship him. And as for the oppression, I think that's pretty obvious too, because, well, according to the Bible, I should be killed. And so should many others, because one of the implications of the Bible is to kill the curious. And then there's also kill those who kill. So if you're a Christian, you have to kill people, and then other Christians should have to kill you, and then there should only be one person left, because apparently, Christians aren't allowed to commit suicide. That's apparently against the rules, though it's not in the Bible as far as I've seen. It's just something people say. So yeah, I don't think anyone would be left on planet Earth if we were to follow the Bible. Not a good idea. The criminal is a curious one.
Careful.
Sorry. I mean, technically, God can't be a criminal. He is a law unto himself. Whatever he does goes. So, technically speaking, that's the only statement he said that was actually true. But probably for the wrong reasons. Which is probably what makes it worse. I mean, God is considered all good, so anything God does is good. If God tries to, commit mass genocide with the flood, that's a good thing. So maybe mass genocide isn't necessarily a bad thing according to the Bible. And if you want something more specific, because he was trying to get rid of sinners at that point, so that's probably an unfair example, but 2 Samuel 12 would show you that God is not all good, or you have a bad sense of good and bad. In 2 Samuel 12, we've mentioned it already, God directly kills a baby. He gives it a sickness, and after 7 days it dies, and it did this as a punishment for his father's sins, which goes against the Bible. Again. And what goes really wrong with this is I've genuinely had Christians tell me that it was good that God killed that innocent baby for no other reason than God is good. So, it apparently, according to theism, this Christianity version, it can be all good to kill an innocent baby. And I'm sorry, but I will never get on board with that. So yeah, it's hard to criminalize a God when all good is being written by what they do. Treats neighbours like dirt. Literally or figuratively, because God created us out of dirt according to the Bible, right? I think it says dust from the ground, but, that's what dirt is. So anyone who believes that the Bible is true should feel justified by treating everyone around them like dirt, because that's all they are to them, isn't it? Dirt that has been endowed with life, that's it. To be honest, this actually explains a lot.
They're very well aware of the implications of what I'm saying for society in general. They know perfectly well that if everybody didn't believe in God, the comfortable lives they live in extremely agreeable suburbs, where they can trust people not to cheat them and rob them and mug them and rape them, would come to an end.
You realise what he's saying here, that all atheists want to rape and murder people. I know he said that if everyone didn't believe in God, that would be the case. But what, if one Christian was left on the planet, everything would be fine? I don't really think that's what he means. I just think he's trying to put across that all atheists are evil. Which, considering what we've just spoke about, I find fucking ironic. As I said, I've had Christians genuinely justify God killing an innocent baby because God is all good, and people claiming they want to be like God because God is all good. So therefore, the people who are saying that atheists are all evil, I could just as easily say Christians all want to murder babies, so that they can be more like their God, who is all good, that killed a baby. That's stupid. If you believe that story to be true, or the Bible to be true, then surely you want to be better than God. Because if you don't, then you really need to work on your morals. Because in this case, it's not hard to realise that humans, you yourself, have a better judgment of morality than the God of the Bible. Which in and of itself should show you that that God doesn't make sense.
They want to keep the secret to themselves. They want to have all the joys, not just now, all the joys and all the advantages provided by Christianity, but not pay the dues.
I don't see the joys of religion. Many claim that it's about the social aspect, the community. But you don't need religion for that. I don't see any other joy from religion other than the socializing aspect of it, to socialize with other people and pretend that God exists, like children do with Santa Claus. I mean, even when children learn that Santa Claus doesn't exist, some of them still pretend to believe, so that they can enjoy Christmas and potentially be rewarded for it. If it's things like Christmas that you're meaning, the holidays, then, well, I let my kids experience Christmas because I think it would be horrible not to let them do that when everyone else does. Going into school and, not being able to talk about Christmas because you didn't experience it would be horrible. It's got nothing to do with religion for us. It's just family socializing. Just because it originated from a religious context doesn't mean it has to remain that way. And to be fair, Christmas is more of a commercial event nowadays than it ever was a religious one.
No, not just now, because I'm just finishing. I normally do, but this evening I've decided not to. I've decided just to give them a Christian kicking. And
yay, metaphorical violence. You see, my morals as an atheist tells me that violence is wrong and that shouldn't be done. In fact, to be fair, I'm a bit of a pacifist. So yeah, I think it's even wrong to say that people are deserving of violence. I think that's wrong.
And that is why, when you challenge the atheist side on this very point, they run from it, refusing to discuss it. That is why nobody ever answers Thomas Nagel's question, why is it that they so much want there not to be a God? Well, I'll tell you exactly why. It's for precisely the same reasons as I very much want there to be one. Vote for the motion, please.
Well, I don't think we've run away from the question at all here, and we've also addressed Peter's lack of understanding of atheism and his own religion. Feel free to add or address anything you've seen so far in this video, but we're about to see what the actual channel owner has to say about Peter's speech here.
Stephen Hawking wrote in The Grand Design that it is hard to imagine how free will can operate if our behavior is determined by physical law. So it seems that we are no more than biological machines and that free will is just an illusion. That is the position of a naturalist who believes that there is nothing beyond what our senses can test.
I feel like we're going back to the beginning. Stop trying to claim what other people believe. If you want to know, you can ask and address them individually. But many people have different beliefs, even if they claim to be of the same belief system as someone else. It's not hard. Now, the Christian God is all-knowing. He knows what you have done, he knows what you are doing, and he knows what you will do. Feel free to correct me, but this sounds like a grand design sort of component to Christianity. Not all Christians would believe in this grand design, but some, maybe most, do. Now, with this grand design that's in place, it's in motion, but it's already predefined because God is all-knowledgeable. Because if God doesn't know what you're going to do, then God is not all-knowing. But if God does know what you're going to do, then you cannot change that. You can't stray away from what you were predestined to do. Therefore, even in that regard, free will is an illusion in Christianity. Based on Christianity, this is a prerequisite that this is actually the case. But taking a naturalistic approach will likely make conclusions based on reality in the natural world around us. So to us, free will may seem like an illusion, but there are still possibilities where it might not be, and that free will actually exists. For example, the universe down on the smallest of scales, the quantum universe. The universe on the quantum level isn't actually deterministic, it's probabilistic, which means free will could exist based on probability, rather than a predetermined plan that was laid out before time itself.
Yet, internally, we scream and hunger and thirst for justice. When we see someone wronged, especially if they are poor, old, sick, very young, our hearts scream about the injustice, that something must be done.
Yeah, we as humans believe that something must be done, but I don't think he just means that someone gets harmed or is harmed by another person. I'm not sure, but I just want to address his point accurately just in case. But I think he means that things that happen naturally that are bad, like terminal sickness. And I agree, most, if not all people, will want something to be done about that, rather than just ignoring it and hoping that it goes away. But from my point of view, I would rather try and do anything that I can to help, or seek help from others that may have the ability to help better than I could. I'd do anything in my power to make sure that person gets whatever they need, from whoever they need. But I'm not just going to put my hands together and hope that it goes away. The problem about justice here is certainly more of a problem for religious people, and it's an argument atheists use against them. It's the problem of evil, and I don't understand why he thinks it's a good argument for religion.
Question. If we are a biological machine with actions predetermined, then why would we have a passion for justice?
Answer. We've already spoke about this, and he's not realizing it's his problem too. Religion doesn't get a free pass just because it's someone else's problem too. It's a problem for both of us.
And if that passion is merely an illusion, then why do anything about it? If it's just biological machines bumping into each other and breaking each other, then from whence cometh human value?
The first part is a bit nonsensical if you think about it. If you are unable to make decisions, why don't you make the decision to do nothing? Well, because it was predetermined that we wouldn't give up, and I wouldn't have the ability to make the decision otherwise, would I? That would be like me saying, if your God has a grand design, and he has planned out your entire life and knows exactly what you're going to do, why don't you sit around and do nothing for the rest of your life? Because God planned that for you.
Of course, we see and understand human value at our core. Even the most diehard atheist believes in human worth and the value of human life, even if it's just for the humans who agree with them.
I agree, and I also see value in all life, even woodlice, and I kind of have a phobia of those things. Many people see gold as having value, sometimes more value than a human life. But yet, gold doesn't have free will, so I don't really get your point here. It just kind of seems preachy.
And while they didn't bring me to faith, I fully believe that our inner passions for justice and our inner longing for love, that these things represent something so much greater than purposeless biological machinery operating within a mass domino effect. Instead, they represent the very image of God. Imago Dei.
So he's making out that our inner desire for justice and love is the very image of God itself. Quite frankly, Christian love has a lot to say for itself in this regard. You know the rhetoric of love the sinner and hate the sin? You know, used against homosexuality a lot? Allows hate to spread under the guise of Christian love. Just one of many of the bad views projected by the Bible. As for justice, the Bible says that children will not be punished for the sins of their father, yet God directly contradicts that. Quite literally by God's own accord, directly killing a baby because his father killed someone else. That sort of justice could stipulate that if your dad did something wrong, you could justly be killed for it. I cannot agree with that. That is evil.
Christ is king. Every knee will bow. Absolutely.
Wow, it's like a war speech. I refuse to bend the knee to his God. Even if God is real and accurate to Christianity and the Bible, then I refuse to worship such an evil being, because it is not worthy of worship. God could be real. I could never know. And if God is worthy of worship, then you'd have to throw out the Bible. Thank you for watching. Feel free to comment before you go. Let me know what you thought of this video. And there are 2 videos on screen right now. Feel free to click on one, and I'll see you there.